more.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, to Hey, It's the Luskos, and the crowd goes wild. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Levi.
And hello to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us today. Oh, gum. I just had gum in my mouth. That's so rude.
The teacher is going
to
to bust you. How could you? Jenny, this is a great episode that we have in front of us today.
Yeah, it really is. I'm excited for you today to listen to this podcast.
You know, a while back, God brought an amazing influence into my life, into our lives, and that's the relationship that developed with Pastor Chris Hodges, who leads a church called the Church of the Highlands in Alabama, and he is an amazingly kind person. He reminds me a lot of Jimmy Fallon. That was one of the first impressions that I had. He's always preaching with his little suit jacket on and just so put together. And I was like, he just looks like Jimmy Fallon. And then getting to know him and getting to know his ministry. He's just been so intentional about depositing and pouring into a next generation of pastors and leaders, and just the most kind person, been able to spend some time in his home. And I would say our lives in ministry are better because of Pastor Chris Hodges.
Yeah, I agree. I am so thankful for how God has brought him into our life, and even just the influence of fasting and praying as a church. Like,
yep.
Just some basic things that have really changed our lives. And
very good.
I'm so thankful.
He has a new book out as of May. So last month it came out. It's called Out of the Cave. We do get to that in this conversation. Stepping into the light when depression darkens what you see. Powerful book. Yeah. If you or anybody you know has had battles with depression, this would be a resource, a podcast that you're going to want to share and let someone else in your life know about. As always, want to let you know that you can, if you are listening to this, watch the full episodes on video on Access More's app and also on YouTube. All you have to do is search for Levi and Jenny Lusko on YouTube. And while you're there, you might want to, after you watch a cat video or two, hit subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of these as they come out every Thursday, as long as the season lasts.
Dun, dun, dun.
But right now, I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with our friend, Pastor Chris Hodges. Pastor Chris Hodges, welcome to Hey, It's the Luskos.
Hey, thank you so much. This is going to be fun.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So glad you're here with us today.
Now, I thought we would begin with one of my favorite things about listening to you, and that is some of those good old Creole Cajun jokes. I mean, I
you really want one?
Jay,
yes.
You've heard the Boudreaux jokes, right?
I just a few.
Because you're from Louisiana, and
South
so
Louisiana.
that's the absolute. So this character,
heart of Cajun land, yeah.
Yeah. So the first time I ever heard you, you kept telling these jokes, and is it Boudreaux?
Boudreaux. He's the stereotypical Cajun.
How do you spell Boudreaux?
Boudreaux.
Gotta have the X at the end of it. Yeah. So it's like Papa Doe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And he's
so we
like
say his dog. His name is Fido, Phydeaux.
There you go. Now, did you come up with this name, or is it actually the guy?
Oh no. It's there are Boudreaux jokes. There are books. There are loads of books on Boudreaux jokes. They're just the stereotypical crazy Cajun, So these just, I don't know. I've told them my whole life. In fact, I used to do stand-up comedy.
Is that right?
Wow.
Oh yeah, I could probably do 50 in a row without notes right now.
Well, when you're loose, it's funny. You do get into that rhythm, and I've always told people you remind me a lot of Jimmy Fallon. When people watch, like seeing your style on stage, always with a blazer, very similar kind of look, and you get into a rhythm, and you can tell there's something in that.
It's self-deprecating. Honestly, I think one of the best ways to connect to an audience, because they have you up on this perch or whatever. They think, so if you can just kind of bring yourself down to their level and the jokes you're telling them on yourselves, So I always say, if you can't have fun with a Cajun, it's your fault, So just enjoy people, and you might not learn anything, but we're going to have a good time, kind of a thing.
Come on. So what's maybe top two favorite Boudreaux jokes?
So probably my favorite is when he was on an airplane and there was an explosion, boom, and the captain comes on and says, "Man, I hate to told y'all this, but we lost one of our engine, but we can fly this plane on 3 engines, but we're going slower, so we're going to be 30 minutes late." And so a few minutes later, boom, another explosion. Captain comes on, "Man, I hate to told y'all this again, but we lost another engine. But this whole plane can fly on 2 engines, but we're going to be an hour late." So sure enough, again, boom, another explosion. The captain says, "Man, you probably figured it out. We had another loss of an engine, but we can fly the whole plane on 1 engine, but we're going to be 2 hours late." And Boudreaux leaned over to the guy next to him and says, "Man, I tell you what, if we lose that last engine, we're going to be up here all day." So it's stuff like that. I know, it's just so silly.
Very good.
That's so great.
It's crazy. So
I think my personal favorite was the vasectomy story. That was
I don't tell that one publicly. You just busted me there. Yeah.
that one was
Cajun vasectomy.
the Cajun vasectomy, which
Cajun
is
vasectomy.
leaves people something to the imagination there.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, fantastic!
Wow.
Now, how long did you live in Louisiana?
So I was born and raised there. And at 23 or 4, we moved to Colorado Springs for 7 years. Moved back, had 3 of our 5 kids in Colorado Springs. Moved back 7 years later, spent 7 more years back at my home church, and then planted Highlands in 2001. So have been here 20 years now. So
Wow.
yeah, it's home. It's still my home church. I still call the pastor there my pastor. And so
Yeah.
I don't get back much because all of our family, literally everybody in our family, moved to Birmingham to be with us, to be a part of the church plant 20 years ago. So no family there, but I still love it.
You emptied
So,
the state out. You dragged them all to Alabama, kicking and
at
screaming.
least the Hodges and the Hornsbys. Yeah, sure did.
Now,
Wait, did you know that you had Colorado Springs?
yeah, I was going to
in
say,
common?
I was born in Pueblo and I was raised in Colorado Springs.
Really?
Yeah, so I lived there till I was 10. I mean, I didn't get much time, but yeah, went to CSCS for elementary school, and
So what years would that have been?
that had been 82 to 92.
So we were there at the same time. I was there 87 to 94.
Right.
Whoa.
And you were at New Life, which is
I was
that
at New
massive
Life.
church. Yeah, I went. Yeah, so I mean, that's just so funny. I don't have a lot of memories, but I remember like Garden of the Gods and going to Air Force Falcon games, and they would always do those flybys, and then Old Mile High Stadium, watching John Elway play with my dad, and
That's awesome.
all Elitch's and all those Casa Bonita for birthdays.
Yeah, if you know Casa Bonita, you're a true Colorado.
Yeah, they do the cliff diving indoors, which is not something you see in a lot of places.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's a cafeteria style Mexican place. So you go through, get your food, and there are cliff divers and there are caves, and it's the coolest place ever. It's the first place we would bring people when they visited in town. We drove up to Denver and take them to Casa Bonita.
Wow.
So funny. Now, my friend Peb Jackson, who you probably know do you know Peb?
I don't know him.
Okay, he's a guy who was one of the original kind of founders of Focus on the Family, part of the board from the early days.
Oh, sure.
Good guy. He's just turned 77 this week. He's fighting cancer, but he's been like a mentor to me. And so I went down during the pandemic to spend a little time with him, and because he got COVID, and it was real scary at that age, obviously. And so when he kind of came back, I was excited to take him to lunch. But we were there when they were opening up the first In-N-Out burger in Colorado Springs, and the line was 5 miles wrapped around the block, but it was right across the street from New Life, so your old haunt there.
Yeah, exactly. And I lived right there too, so could walk out my house and see the flybys. I was a mile from the gates of the Air Force Academy. In fact, I taught a religion class at the Air Force Academy back in the day, and just loved every part of it.
And that was a season of life where you were in youth ministry.
Exactly. Yeah, we moved there. I was actually the 3rd staff member back when it was in a storefront, and of course it was there during its glory years when it grew so big. I led the worship. Little known fact, I led the worship. Yeah, I was.
Oh my goodness.
I've done music my whole life in church before planning. Yeah. So back in the glory days too, back in the Ron Canoli, those some of the where you had it wasn't a great worship band unless you had a horn section, So that's the good old days.
That is so great.
Now, what do you miss from youth ministry? Because I mean, that we both got our start. Jen and I both met in youth ministry. I mean, I feel I'm equally convinced that it's the best ministry you can do.
Yes.
But then also it does take a decade off your life for every lock-in you do because you don't
Exactly, and donuts you sell.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
And eats.
80% of people make their decision about Christ before they turn 21. So there's the significance. You're
Hello.
catching people at the time they're making the decision that will impact, of course, their eternity and the rest of their life. So that's the cool part. I think it was also fun that because they seem to be a bit more pliable, like the script could be written on their hearts a little easy when in dealing with adults, which I very much love still. There's a lot of water under the bridge. And so there's a lot of script that's already been written. So it felt like the page was a little blanker with a student, and I enjoyed that so much. And so to this day, I have a relationship with a lot of the students that are now pastoring some of the greatest churches in America.
Gosh.
So that's always rewarding. Anybody that's older knows that the most rewarding things aren't the things you've done, but the people you've invested in that are now doing it. So it's a great
beautiful.
joy.
That's so beautiful.
That's really important to hear that. So everyone listening, I mean, just think if you have a team at your church where you can, volunteer to be a small group leader for students or drive to help in any way, get around young people, pay for scholarships for whatever youth summer camp or conference. I mean, you guys do one of the greatest student events in the world. I'll be so excited. Jen and I will both be there at Motion this summer. I mean, it's just every year that is a highlight. It's more students coming together in teenage years in the name of Jesus than any event in the world every single summer. It's absolutely, you guys literally have to rent an arena for it, and it's outgrown that pretty well.
Yeah, it has. We close out registration months before the event. And the largest venue we can find, I think it seats like 17,000. So yeah, it's pretty cool. God's been good.
It's unbelievable. And our first Motion experience, it wasn't the gathering of thousands upon thousands that impacted me the most. It wasn't even I think that you guys, I'm pretty sure Tim Tebow was sweeping the parking lot. It was like every artist you've ever heard of and every speaker you've ever heard of. It was just all incredible. But what marked me, my first encounter with, and I hadn't had the privilege of meeting you yet or anything, was the prayer in the pre-service. I mean, I came in contact with, it was like everyone was in there talking, chatting, coffee, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden it was like, all right, we're going to pray. And people just everywhere around us, this prayer. And it just really marked us as what a culture of prayer. And the more we've gotten to know you, the more we've learned, there's some things you guys have done right. You're a great preacher. The music's good. But man, you guys are a praying church. Yeah.
And I have to give credit to my heritage. And my church growing up was called Bethany World Prayer Center. Wow. And my pastor is still to this day the most praying man I know. And we've been doing 21 days of fasting to start the year since I was 19 years old. So I'll be 58 this year. So almost 40 years of learning the power of prayer and fasting. And so a lot of influence from, Paul Yonggi Cho in Korea. And just, I'm very, very grateful for it because, I mean, it's a cliche almost sometimes, the whole not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. But it really is true. And so, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the way I was trained and taught and raised.
Yeah, it's incredible. What a legacy.
Your example has rubbed off on us. And, because we weren't raised, neither of us, in a culture. We were thankful for the churches we grew up in, and we both came to know Jesus in them. Yeah. But it wasn't something where there was corporate fasts. It was not just, They really didn't talk about giving much. They didn't talk about fasting much, And so as we got to know you, we would hear about this. And I remember we both were like, we really want to try that. And I remember calling up one of the pastors who had really made a mark on me growing up. And I was just like, he was serving on our board at the time. And I just said, hey, want to talk about fasting. What do you think about fasting? And he said, I don't really do that too much. And pastor's a big church, I don't really do that much. I go, yeah, well, is there a reason why? He goes, well, early on I tried it. And he goes, just between me and you, I wasn't very good at it. I said, you weren't very good at it. And he said, well, I got hungry. And I said,
just between you and him.
I'm pretty sure, well, I didn't say his name. I said, I'm pretty sure that's the point, and it was just such a funny thing. And I think we all have to go through a process of discovering what from our upbringing we want to keep and what we're called to walk away from. Some of it's scaffolding that got us here. And I'm so grateful that as our world got bigger. The church we grew up in, we were given a great foundation for expository preaching and a reliance on the Holy Spirit and evangelism as a priority. But there wasn't as much communication done on giving and fasting and other things that we're grateful that along the way God saw fit to cross our paths with. But I remember the first time it was like toe in the water, 5 days. And we told everyone, and you could do just social media too, and so it was like so many disclaimers and off ramps, and making it easy. I think maybe 3 people picked food. And so as it's progressed now, we wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Just to think of 2020, even alone, that year began with that foundation of prayer.
Yeah, that's so good. I think of that verse, where Jesus, his disciples went out and, they were doing a bunch of miracles and it was working well until they got to that kid who had a demon. They couldn't cast the devil out of him. And the dad brings the boy to Jesus and said, hey, your disciples weren't able to do this one. And Jesus makes a comment. It's so cool. He says, oh, unbelieving and perverse generation, bring the boy to me. And when I think about unbelieving, I define unbelieving as not connected enough with God, and then perverse, too connected to the world. So he says you have a dual problem. You're actually not connected enough here, but you're too connected there. And then he goes on, of course, and he casts the devil out of the boy. And then he tells his disciples who brought him off to the side and said, why couldn't we drive it out? And he says, oh, this kind comes out by prayer and fasting. And I think a prayer is connecting to God, and fasting disconnecting me from the world. Yes. So if people need a simple thought, it's really not about food as much as how I'm already connected to God, but can I get more connected? And I'm already connected to the world, but how can I be less connected? You put both of those together, a better connection with God and a less connection with the world, you're going to have a God encounter.
Yes.
And just that one single thought alone could really help people kind of, put their toe in the water of fasting.
That's so helpful. Yes. That's a really helpful picture for, I'm sure so many listening who maybe haven't taken that step. And that's really
when you even think,
powerful.
I've heard you say it so many times in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus doesn't say if you fast. He
right.
When you pray, when you give, when you fast. So he's assuming that there's going to be.
You're going to do
it. Yeah. It's kind of, I'm not a smart man, Jenny, but he seems like he wants us to do this thing, and it is funny. You mess with the appetites. And the enemy doesn't want you to do it.
Yep.
And the Holy Spirit sure does.
Yep.
And he gets in there. And for that, our whole church community and our souls owe a great debt of gratitude, which is a long list. Honestly, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on this podcast was just to get a publicly thank you so much for so many different things.
Yeah.
I've loved getting to know you, have had the privilege of being in your home, and the closer I've gotten to you, the more I've respected you. And the more I would say, my leadership, our leadership, and our church has just gotten better. Our ministry's gotten better. Yes. And a lot of that is great love and joy and, a love of fun. You're not just all serious and all the time.
Boudreaux.
Yeah.
I've been told I have that reputation that I could be quite a serious guy, but I do love to have a lot of fun.
Well, I think it's the how good you are with numbers, your background, because your father had a career in Is it
finance,
comptroller?
yeah.
Was it
accounting? Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
He was an auditor. He was the legislative auditor for the state of Louisiana. So always say an accountant hides the mistake. An auditor finds the mistake. So
yeah, exactly. So that just tells you, and of course you have that sharp mind for numbers and all that as well. So you're not at all a dull guy or a guy's not sharp, but at the same time you are just a joy to hang out with and life-giving and so much fun.
The feelings are very mutual about you guys. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we wanted to ask you, you mentioned your time in youth ministry, but going back even a little bit further to when you were a youth, how did you come to know Jesus? Who made the greatest impact on your life when you were a young man?
So I was actually raised in church. I was in church the Sunday after I was born.
Wow.
Literally. And I'll be 58 this year, and I've never missed a Sunday in church in my entire life. I've never not been in church. And so really didn't care for it much, honestly, growing up. I mean, it wasn't my favorite day of the week. I didn't dislike it. I just didn't like it. We were raised Southern Baptist. Mom sang in the choir. Dad played the organ. He was an incredibly gifted musician. He could do more with his feet than I could do. I played the piano too. He could do more with his feet than I can with my hands. I mean, very, very talented musician. And, again, we just went, we were very, very, very involved. I mean, never missed. I volunteered for everything. At 7 years old, I walked the aisle, and followed what I saw others do. Got baptized, but I didn't meet Jesus that day. Nothing in my life changed. I was 7. At 15, though, I got invited to what is now my home church in Louisiana to a youth service by a friend of mine. And I don't think it was the first time I heard the gospel, but it was the first time I heard the gospel. It was the first. It just made so much sense. I'd been in church my whole life, so I knew what they were going to do next. I knew I was going to a room and signing some forms, and I did not raise my hand. I did not respond, even though it was happening in my heart. And I went back to my bedroom that night. It was Christmas of 1978, and I was in my bedroom and I opened my Bible and I read Matthew 7, where Jesus says there are going to be many who called him Lord, prophesied, did miracles, and casted out devils, and not go to heaven. And I thought, well, wow, that's a problem. And because those were all the things, I was doing all the things. I called him Lord. I did all the motions, but then it says, I never knew you. And it was the first time I realized that my condition for my relationship or my Christianity was based on relationship, not religion. And I fell in love with Jesus in my bedroom, got on my knees and gave him my life, told him, if he'll save me, I'll wake up the next day the most on fire Christian he'll ever have. And I've never looked back from that day.
Wow.
I have served him passionately. I led all of my family one at a time, kind of from that church experience to this more spirit-filled church experience, and led my friends to Christ. I led four of my best friends to Christ in the first week of being saved, and just on fire for God. But it was youth pastors that shaped me, that poured into me. I grew up with an inferiority complex, a pretty bad one. I was bullied pretty badly in junior high school, and I acted out the opposite way. I didn't go turtle. I went skunk. I was the guy who would take the dare. I would do anything if you would like me. And so I was a wild kid, just fun, but wild, so had all this inferiority. And so when I got saved, they kept saying, man, there's a champion, you're going to lead people. And I didn't see it. And so I went to LSU to study accounting, to follow Dad's footsteps. And the church talked me into being a part of an internship between my sophomore and junior year of LSU. And I fell in love with ministry. I found what I was supposed to do. And so so that's been now 38 years of full-time ministry. I went to college while I was a full-time staff member. So it was a lot of hard work, but so anyway, so that's kind of the short version of my story. But to answer your question, it was just people who had the ability to see something that I just absolutely knew wasn't there and couldn't see, and said, no, there's a champion on the inside of you. You're going to change the world. You're going to make a difference. And so it's funny, I still deal with inferiority. I still walk out on stage on Sunday nervous, thinking these people are out there are smarter than I am. And what in the world, why me? Why me? And I have to remind myself who I am because of what Jesus did in me, not in my accomplishments or my natural talent, So, so that's kind of the story. The verse that I had plastered to my bathroom mirror that I read every day was in 2 Corinthians 3, that says that I am competent, not because of the letter of the law. So it's not because of my degrees or my skill set, but because of the Spirit. For the law kills and the Spirit gives life. Every day I asked God, I said, Lord, my skill set's not going to be enough. The Holy Spirit needs to come alive on the inside of me. So that's what makes me competent to do what you call me to do. So,
gosh. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. There's so much encouragement in there. I mean, even just for people who are leading young people to see the potential, because I think so often, and I'm learning so much right now about like the age of 13 to 15-year-olds for boys and girls. And it's just like, it really is a lot of just, for some of them, it's called the narcissistic age, where they're really just looking at themselves. And so you see these young people who are like, what kind of human is this? But it's like, no, that takes the eye of faith to see what's in them and to draw that out and to call that out. And I'm so thankful for those people who called that out in you. Cause now it's like you said, to see people who you pour into thrive and flourish and serve God and change the world, for those people in your life to now see what they called out in you and the life that you're living. And that's so encouraging.
No, you're exactly right. In fact, people tend, especially young people, tend to become who the most important people in their life think they'll become. Yeah. So they all have somebody that they admire, young people do. And if it's those people who could say, man, there's something inside of you. We affirm this, or we see this. And I always say that you have to do three things. You have to see it, but then you have to say it. So it's not even enough to see it, but it has to come out of your mouth every day, what you see in that person. And then I always say, start a process where you develop that person into becoming that person. That is what real discipleship is to see it, say it, start it. And when you think of even the relationship like the Father had with Jesus, we only get twice. You know, they were talking every day, but only twice in Scripture do we get the Father's words to his Son. And they were affirming words. You are my Son, whom I love, and I'm well pleased. He said that both at the baptism and at the Mount of Transfiguration. Only words we ever get from the Father to the Son were affirming. You're my Son, whom I love, and I'm well pleased. And I just think if we just did those three things, you know what? We're family. Come on, we're in the same tribe. We belong to each other. And I want you to know, you know what? I love you. I value you. And I'm well pleased. Hey, well done. You did a good job there. People need that affirmation.
Yeah,
you know, so.
That's so helpful.
Gosh. Now, there's so much about that. I love that the night you prayed that prayer and responded to the altar call, you didn't go forward. So
right.
In the service records for that night, on paper, there's one less decision. And yet, look at what God's done through you. That whole quote, I think it was Schuler, who said, anyone can count the seeds in an apple, but only God knows the apples in a seed. And to think about your life with the Ark, with Highlands College, with all of your books you've written, the churches. I mean, you guys have 23 locations in your Church of the Highlands, which if anyone listening hasn't gone onto YouTube and subscribed to the Church of the Highlands feed, you will get encouraged. You're an incredible teacher, life-giving, effervescent, but you communicate so much content. You're my stepmom's favorite teacher. She's always talking about you and just
for the win.
I'm always talking about you. She's just the biggest fan. I guarantee if she knew I was talking with you right now, she'd probably have flown here and be in our office. But but I mean, you really are just fantastic to listen to. But to think that night, whoever was counting the decisions for Christ, it was actually one less than what they thought, because you didn't raise your hand up or didn't go forward.
That's so interesting.
So it's just a reminder. Not everyone who responds is actually you can see with the naked eye.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's I appreciate that. To this day, I feel like I talk to me on a Sunday. I think there's this person who grew up in church and who doesn't want to respond, but in their heart they're responding. So I've even changed the phrasing some to fit where I was at 15. And I'll say, if you're a Christian and you don't know God, well, that's not even theologically correct.
But people know what you mean and they feel it.
Yeah.
And they feel it. Yeah. So I think that's cool. But thank you. You're very kind.
And you think about, do you know who gave that message that night?
Yeah, sure do. There's a guy named Gary McIntosh. He was he went on to be the chaplain at ORU. And he was the youth pastor at the time at that church. So.
Wow! And so would he be tracking with you, aware of what God's done to you?
Absolutely. I've caught up with him, and I've told him that story. And and he just handed his church over to Mike Todd. So the church that Mike Todd now is leading was the previous pastor was Gary McIntosh.
So this guy's a kingmaker, is what he is.
He is a king. Well,
I mean. That's not theologically accurate either, but you know what I mean.
I hear what you're saying, but he is truly, it goes back to that person. Yeah.
You know what he is? He's the king of the assist. And that's just like an incredible thought. Like, who led Billy Graham to faith? Who led what I mean? It's like, that's just such a God gives credit for the one who does the work and the one who helped the one do the work. So, I mean, that's really inspiring to think about. Now you mentioned bullying. I dealt with that a lot. Was that at school, in a neighborhood?
Yeah. It was at school. Yeah. I was small. I was, I was musical. So back in those days, you weren't cool if you were musical. And today it would have worked out, I think, pretty well. But I was actually classically trained. I had 30 piano students at 15 years old. So, I mean, I was really good at
And
it.
you've kept that up. You've told me that you lead worship in your living room a lot on the grand piano and all that.
Yeah, I play every day. I have a C7 Yamaha in my house that I play every single day. And yeah, it was tough because, you know, we had just moved from one side of town to the other. So I went into my junior high year changing schools, changing friends, and it just didn't go so well. So but I remember, you know, crying in my bedroom saying, that's never going to happen to me. And I came up with ways to be liked that weren't all good. And so anyway, I don't regret it. I look back on it now. I think it makes me better at who I am and what I do, having felt, you know, what so many people feel, you know. So it's that whole God, the devil intended it for bad, but God will turn it around for the good.
100%.
Yeah,
What, was it more verbal or was it physical as well?
It was mostly verbal and a little bit physical. Back in those days, you know, I actually got paddled by my gym teacher for something my friends set me up for. So I didn't do it, but they made it look like I did this thing. And so when the coach came out, he brought me in his office, and that's back in the day where they took a paddle and you couldn't walk for a few hours. I mean, you know, and so I got bitter with every stroke, you know, kind of a deal.
Did any of those families ever end up randomly, coincidentally getting an audit from the state of Louisiana?
I don't know, but that's a fantastic idea. I wish you had known that.
Dad, I have a great idea. And
Can you help me with this?
We need an audit here. Gosh, that's tough. Yeah, see, mine was the same thing. It was... but
yours was physical.
Well, I got physically bullied a bunch, and I wrote about that in a book where I had to actually have surgery. I got, you know, back in the days, in those days, the Beavis and Butthead era, the big thing was, you know, kicking a guy between the legs. And it was just like this group of kids, that was their thing. If they caught you unaware, they were going to kick you between the legs. It happened so much to me in my 8th grade year that it actually really damaged me. And I had to get, you know, surgery, and it was really layers and layers of shame. And they gave me this terrible nickname called Rat Boy. And that's what they called me, Rat Boy. And my 8th grade yearbook, just all the endorsements in the back of the yearbook was watch out for the cheese, don't fall for the traps, blah, 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 all this stuff. And it so marked me. It's to the present day, a lot of the shadow side of the good of who my success and ability to communicate and ability to be funny, I developed as a coping mechanism to prove to the world I was enough. And so obviously God redeems those things, but also like peeling through the layers of the shame that, you know, became so attached to my identity. And on my worst days, and it so encouraged me what you were just saying about the baptism of Jesus, because the Father doesn't only look at what I accomplish and how good my last sermon was, but he just loves me for me, and he doesn't see me as Rat Boy, you know? Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. And I totally relate to, you know, what you were just saying. And in fact, it carried on into my college years. So I'm now a sophomore in accounting, and one of the courses you have to take is speech. It's the only course that I failed in college.
Hilarious.
Was the one course that I would end up doing the rest of my life.
Be a master communicator in the country and failed at speech.
So for all those who are failing at something, you know, don't see that as a final. Come on. Because it could be the very thing that God's going to use. That's the irony of it. I'm not using any of the accounting, and I'm using all of the speech. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Well, Einstein wasn't much of a student, you know, so it is what it is. Yeah. He said that the biggest thing that got in the way of his learning was his education. Yeah. So, I mean, it is funny, and obviously no shade being thrown on teachers who are doing a great job trying to educate, especially through Zoom and all the things they're having to do these days. But
just how different kids learn, and
every learning style is different. Have you been more of a book learner, self-starter, or you know, do you like classroom setting?
Yeah, no, I was not a good student either. I knew the material and didn't test well. I went into every test thinking, I'm going to kill this thing. And like, B, like what? What in the world? I just could not believe. Yeah. So for some reason I didn't test very well, but I was more of a visual learner. I could copy what somebody else did. And to this day, I love what I call proven models. I still go and study churches and because I always think there's somebody doing something better than we're doing it. I want to go see it. I want to go see, you know, what can transfer, what's there to learn there. So, I love models and mentors, you know, and my favorite learning setting to this day is a round table type of setting where I can ask questions. And so, now. That's what I do now. I create the setting that I enjoy the most to learn.
Well, and
Love
you've
it.
been so gracious to invite us into a few of those, and those have been so. We can not only I mean, you're being humble that you are there to learn because you're a great question asker, but I mean, you've also been really generous with what you've learned in your years, and I've noticed that just such an intentionality with which you're approaching, this season of your life. Saying, I think one of the things you started with was the greatest investment is to pour into leaders, not just to do the work yourself, but to share what you learned and help raise up the next who are going to do that. And that is so encouraging.
Well, thank you. I love it. That's what I feel. That's where I feel the wind in my sails more than anything else that I do is when I'm helping another pastor reach their full potential. So
Amazing.
Yeah, come on.
Okay, so you've been married to Tammy. It'll be 36 years.
yeah, just had 35.
35.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
So,
And 5 kids.
5 kids.
And how many grandkids are we at now?
7.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's the best.
my
Oh, gosh. Hang in there. I always tell parents, don't kill your kids. Better ones are coming.
That is such.
Let them live.
Don't kill your kids. Better ones are coming.
Yeah, oh my goodness. They're fantastic.
That's a great line.
What's the best part of being a grandpa?
Because first of all, you're mature enough not to freak out about things. So when you're in your 20s, it's like, okay, it's just survival, right?
Yes.
But in your 50s, it's like, you know what? Life is fine. We're going to be okay. You're way more relaxed. But then to have the beauty of playing with them and encouraging them and then sending them home too, boy, there's just nothing gets better than that.
Okay, so
What did they call you?
Yeah, what did they call you?
Papa and Honey.
Did they decide that, or did you guys pick those names?
Yeah, I loved Papa for some reason, so you hear it in other cultures. How that's what's one of the most endearing terms for a father is Papa. So I've always loved it. But my wife picked Honey. We went through all the grandmother names and she picked Honey, and we always think she's qualified. So no one's sweeter than Tammy. So, but it's Papa and Honey.
That's
I love that.
precious. Yeah, it's funny to hear the different things. Like Pastor Jensen, his grandkids call him G Daddy, which is pretty gangster.
Yeah, it is.
That's pretty good.
I think John Bevere is G Daddy too. I think John and Lisa have
There's
the
a
G
lot of
Daddy
good
mama
options.
thing.
Yeah, that's very good. Wow, we're looking forward to it. We feel a little bit like we're grandparents now because our oldest wave would be 15, 13, 10 and 9, and then there's big gap, and then Lennox is 3. So we were young parents, and now we're also kind of old parents. So we feel a little bit like some days we're Lennox's grandparents because we're just so tired. It's just
Right.
We've been in it so long.
But way more mature. Like it's not as right. You know what I'm talking about.
You have more
true.
perspective. We're a little less
Pick your battles
keyed up.
differently.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe we're paying for it. The kid's wild too. But we also had no experience with boys, so that was so
4
different.
girls and then a boy.
4 girls peeing sitting down, and then he's just peeing everywhere. I mean, yesterday he peed in a Ziploc baggie and left it on the ottoman, and we're just like, why did you do this? That doesn't make any sense.
That's hilarious.
He threw a chair at his babysitter. We're just like, you're a little savage, man.
Yes.
That's great.
Have you noticed that? I mean, boys and girls, just massive difference.
Yeah, so we had a girl, then 4 boys.
Oh,
and then by the way,
inverted.
6 grandsons. So we had 10 boys in a row.
So you know boys.
We're trying to figure out the girl thing. Yeah, they come with all the emotions and they're processing everything all the time. We're processing. Like, okay, well.
I got a friend who says that if he'd had a girl first, he'd had 10 of them because they're so easy compared to the boy. He said just such a difference in raising them.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
It's a different kind. It's a different kind, different seasons, different phases.
Physical aggression versus emotional complications.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
how did you and Tammy meet?
So her dad was a missionary in Germany when I was a youth pastor, and we brought students to his work there in Germany. And he literally proposed to me. He took me to lunch one day and said, "Have you ever thought about my daughter, Tammy?" I said, "Well, can't say that I have." He said, "Well, I'd love for you to take her out." And I said, "Sure, anything for you, and because I loved him. He would go on to be my very best friend in the world. I mean, just, we talked on the phone every day for 29 years.
Wow.
And so he actually introduced me to his daughter. I took her out, and just literally about 6 months later, we were married.
Wow.
And yeah, it was very, very quick. But I was, I fell in love with the family as much as I fell in love with her. And of course, kind of really after we got married, my love for her obviously has grown and grown and grown. And now 35 years later. But Yeah. So it was the old school arranged marriage.
I mean,
kind
it
of
is
deal.
kind of an arranged marriage, which is,
Wow.
I mean, it's kind of cool. It takes the pressure off a little bit there.
I believe in it, actually. I think, dating is it's less than 100-year-old concept. Back in the day, the families were involved, at least the dad or maybe the brothers, but
Yeah.
they would serve as both gatekeeper and scout. So they were there to protect and to help find, right? And so, and I think, honestly, I think there's a lot of principles from those past ways of doing things that should be rediscovered again. So
Now with you,
Amen.
I mean, you've walked through this with your children, lots of different styles. Was there any like that with you all? Did you guys enter in any, what is it, goat giving, thigh touching?
I don't think we did that. Ran out of goats or something somewhere. But yeah, but no, we were very involved. I think it was at one level with my daughter, different with my sons.
Yeah.
So probably way more so with my daughter. I felt like,
Is that pretty hard for you as a father?
No, but I just wanted it to be the right guy, for sure. Not that I didn't want the guys to marry the right girl. I felt more of a responsibility for some reason.
Yeah.
And her, and her situation but all of them have found beautiful, wonderful people. And
Did you guys have an age? Now I'm asking for a friend here who's got a 15-year-old daughter. Did you guys have an age for dating, or what kind of principles did you guys, come up with for that?
We didn't, but in hindsight, I think that's probably a good idea. I do think you need to measure the maturity of, probably a bit more than maybe we did, just as far as their readiness goes. Just because and slower is better than fast. Just there's no reason to get in a hurry. So
Yeah.
those are important principles.
How old was she when she started dating her now husband?
So we did put inside of them, like we didn't think that one-on-one, just two people dating was healthy unless you were prepared to be married. And so we didn't really encourage that in their adolescent years.
Yeah.
We didn't mind them going out with friends, but make them group settings. We didn't, there was nothing good could come from being one-on-one.
Yes.
And so we were really pretty, not strict. We'd sold them on it before they cared, so that when they cared, they were already believed in it. And that's the best advice.
That's
so we
really
talked
good
to them about it,
advice.
when they were 11 and 12 and didn't really care about it too much. And so,
So was she in
so
high
they all
school?
followed that. I'm sorry.
Was she in high school when she started like hanging out with him, or?
No, she was actually in college. They met in college. And of course, in my mind, they were ready. They were age-wise ready to take that next step. And so, and they went slow. But I wanted to make sure not only that were they compatible, but was he compatible even with the rest of us in the family? Yeah. And because, for us, when you step into this family, you step into being on, tens of thousands of refrigerators for Christmas, you know what I'm saying, on Christmas cards. And I mean, are you ready to step into this fishbowl too?
And it's a different level of spiritual warfare as well.
It really is. It's everybody knows you now. And so, and some people are prepared for that and some aren't. So I've had that conversation with every person my children have married. Like, I want you to make sure you know what you're stepping into here, because this is a big deal. And you're going to be on 100,000 refrigerators every Christmas. You know what I'm saying? So
That's so healthy and so helpful. Gosh.
Yeah. Wow. Well, in addition to leading the church and all the things you have your hand in, you also are an author. You've written 5 different books. So congratulations. I applaud anybody who's ever undertaken writing a single book, but to continue to do that year after year, it's fantastic. Did you always dream of writing, or was that something that you felt a fire for at a certain point?
Not at all, actually. I don't have a love of writing. I have a love of stewarding the messages God's given me. So it's more of a fear of the Lord thing that produces my writing, that I don't want to go before God having not, stewarded everything that he's given me and in any form that I can give it in. So John Maxwell is like a dad to me. We talk almost every week, and he's more than a mentor.
You call him a spiritual father, right?
Really is. I mean, we vacation together. It's like family. And he was the one who just said, that writing is the one thing that will outlive you. You have no choice, but if you have messages that are unique to you, you have to get it in print form. So I have to give him the credit for me doing this. I never really dreamed of being an author, but I have some messages that I'm very passionate about, and that I try to put on the page, you know.
Interesting. And it's in the Library of Congress, and it's there. It's going to be there forever. I mean, that is good. Even if YouTube gets taken down, these books are there. Going to be floating around on eBay and in secondhand bookstores. And are there some books that have shaped you as a reader? I imagine I've seen your library. I know you're a consummate, reader.
I love leadership. So I've read, a lot of books around that topic, both Christian and non-Christian. And so, yeah, it's John's books, honestly. When he wrote, probably not even near the top of the list of ones that have sold, is my favorite, called Today Matters.
Today Matters.
He taught me the art of mastering the day, every day, that your life is not a goal. It's the sum total of single days lived well.
Oh, that's so good.
And so it's just a fabulous concept. And so that impacted me probably as much as any book, but also the other great leadership books from the Good to Greats and all the Lencioni books I love. I know Patrick, I've had the privilege of knowing him, and he's come and spoken at Highlands College before. And so just love his style, love the pragmatism. I'm very pragmatic. I'm not very artsy. I love accomplishing things and things getting done. So those really appeal to me. But those are some of the books that have.
Do you read fiction or read biographies or history?
Biographies, yes. Fiction, no. I really, I don't read for entertainment. And I don't want this to come out the wrong way, because it doesn't need to come out holy. I love the Bible. I can't put it down. I read it all day long. I mean, honestly, and I love studying the Bible.
Amazing.
So I really don't go much further than that in my reading. This is the only book that I literally enjoy studying. My favorite day of the week is my study day. I love preparing for a message more than delivering the message.
That's awesome.
So I just love the Bible. It's like prayer is still a discipline for me. Studying the Bible isn't. I have to force myself to put it down. So that's where I love, is digging into God's word. So
have you written a study Bible?
I've not. No, it seems like a daunting task. Oh my goodness.
Chris Hodges' study Bible would be fantastic.
Yes.
Well, that's the first time that thought has ever entered my mind. So let me
file it away. Copyright Jenny Lusko, 2021.
If that ends up happening, you'll be in the credits.
You'll be in the end notes. Yeah. Hey, it's the Luskos. Now, if you're reading, are you on a Kindle, or do you like reading the actual physical book?
I have to have the paper. Yeah, I have to have the paper. I still order the paper book. If I need to know the information right then because I'm doing research, I'll get the Kindle, but I'll still, because I have to have it in that hour, but I'd much rather have the physical book. The only problem with physical books is I'm running out of places to put them, so
yes.
It's a real problem.
Stacks of books in the most embarrassing places right now.
Yeah. And are you highlighting? How do you retain? What's your system for retention?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do bend the ear down and yellow marker a lot. And then I always take it straight to typing the big key ideas into documents that are going to show up in future sermons. So I probably have 40 documents open right now of things I'm going to do someday. So they're just messages that's in some form, and I'll find a place to put those and just go tuck them away into those different spots. The way I think about study is kind of like shopping for meals. When you go to the store, you don't buy a meal per meal, you'll buy for a week. So you fill a pantry for future meals. And so when I do my studying, I never have to go to the store. My pantry is always full.
Love
so when I'm working on a message, I never have to go shopping, because every day I read, every day I file it somewhere. So every day I fill my pantry. Yeah.
I love hearing about the morning routines and habits of successful people. And you mentioned every day you're reading. So is that something you're doing during the workday, morning, evening? When do you have reading time?
Yeah. So I learned this years ago from a wonderful mentor who taught me that give the best part of your day to your most important activity. And I think probably the only thing someone else can't do for me is be anointed and be prepared to speak. They just can't do that for me. I mean, so So, and I'm a morning person, so I don't give away my mornings. So from 6 to 10, it's just, you can't have those hours. And that's where I do all of that reading, time with God, filing. And so it all happens in that little 4-hour block. The rest of the day is given to meetings and in events and places I go. But it all happens for me in those 4 hours, and I do it every day.
And is breakfast and working out within that chunk too, or where does that go?
I usually eat a very, very light breakfast, if any at all. Many times I like to even fast through the morning, honestly. And exercise for me is at the end of the day, because I don't need to think to do it well. I just got to show up and go through the motions for me. And so I'm a 4 p.m. Hit the bike or hit the spin class or whatever. That's what I like to do.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah.
Now, are you a coffee drinker?
It's my best friend.
Okay.
Yes.
He just the look on your face. So those watching on YouTube, it was just like joy washing over you.
First thing is actually I go to get that coffee and just I got this chair I sit in I've been sitting in it so long it's got holes in it.
That's
but it's
the
my
worst.
chair.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's that chair. And so I pick up God's word first thing. So
and how many cups of coffee are you
it.
through that 6 to 10 a.m. block?
Yeah, 2, maybe 2.5. Yeah. So
and
two full ones for sure.
What's the choice of coffee for Pastor Chris?
Just really good old Louisiana style French roast drip coffee. And so but it's strong. You can stand a spoon up in it, but it's drip coffee. It's
through like a coffee, like a Krups coffee maker or Mr. Coffee or something
exactly,
like that. Yeah,
exactly. So it's a brand that comes out of South Louisiana that has that flavor that I grew up with.
Now, do you ever try to French press?
I have, and I love it. So mine would taste just very much like that.
Okay. Yes, that's my thing. I make a French press every morning, the 4 minutes waiting for it, the whole thing. And then I usually have like,
that's how coffee should be prepared.
Yeah.
It should be steeped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, he could have any coffee machine he wants. Every morning he makes a French press. So it tells you something right there. Like that's his choice because you get such the flavors out of it. Someone just got me one of our college students went home to Louisiana for the spring break, and he brought me back a can of coffee from the Café du Monde. And I was like, man, I didn't even know they had coffee. I mean, I know powdered donuts there, but I haven't tried it yet. So we'll see how.
Beignets.
Oh yeah. You don't call them donuts. That's right. You call them beignets.
Yes, and if you can spell it, you're a true Louisiana person.
No, I can't do that.
Beign.
How's she doing?
E-T?
Yeah, you got some French in you.
She trailed off at the end there.
You did it though. She pulled it
very good. How's the coffee at the Café du Monde? I don't think I've drank it.
It's very good. They call it café au lait. So it's milk. It's strong coffee, but they use hot milk in it and hot whole milk, and it's called café au lait. It's a very unique blend. No, it's very, very good.
Okay,
I don't think I'd want to drink it every morning, but it's very, very good with those donuts.
I'll toast to you when I bust that out. Yeah, I wish I had the donuts to come with it. Now, you wrote a book. We're going to get to your newest in just a moment, but one of my favorite books you've written that I referenced actually this past week in my preaching was the 4 Cups of Wine book you wrote. Could you just unpack that just for a moment?
Yeah, I was in Israel in 2011, and I had a tour guide who was happy to tell you, you think it happened this way, but it didn't. Like, this is not where it happened. This is not what it looked like. It was one of those tour guides, like, he just loved correcting the record on everything. And so last day we're in the Garden of Gethsemane having communion. And he says, by the way, there wasn't 1 cup and 1 bread. I'm like, bro, don't mess with my communion. I was raised Baptist. I know how this thing works. And that was the first time I'd heard that on the night before Jesus went to the cross, that they would have been celebrating a Passover Seder. And in a Passover Seder, there are actually 4 cups of wine that correspond with 2 verses out of Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, and what the Jewish people call the 4 I wills. And they're basically God's promise to the children of Israel. It was his way to get them to leave Egypt, basically, to say, I will do this in you. And now that when they celebrate the Passover, they read the corresponding I will out of Exodus 6 with that cup throughout the Passover meal. And what was so interesting to me, I just found that so fascinating to discover that the 4 cups is the Great Commission. I thought the Great Commission began with Jesus. I had no idea that it had always been in the heart of God to see people saved and delivered and redeemed and live lives of fulfillment. And it was in these 4 cups, the cup of sanctification, which means to get you out. And they read the verse where it says, and I will bring you out of Egypt. And then the second, this cup of deliverance. And that's where it says, and I will free you from being slaves. Which when I first read it, I thought, well, if I'm not in Egypt, then I'm not a slave. But you can be out of Egypt, but Egypt can still be in you.
Right.
And so there's a step you take to settle some of the issues of your past. You're a Christian, but you're still struggling with some issues. There's a step of deliverance. And then the third cup of redemption, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and mighty act of judgment. To redeem means to put something back to what its original intent is. So it's not enough to get people out of the devil's plan for their life, but we have to help them find what God always had for them, so that's their purpose, that's their gifting, that's their calling. And then the final cup of praise is when you're out there making a difference. So this is actually doing what you found in the third cup. And it's when I realized, wow, this has always been in God's heart to what now we say it around Highlands, to know God, to find freedom, to discover your purpose so you can go out there and make a difference. And so I think what we do well, honestly, I think is what we do best at our church is we take people on that spiritual journey. So by making the path clear, the secret to it is making the path clear. And God's been trying to make it clear since Exodus chapter 6.
Come on. And now churches all around the country and world have some version of growth track and, a way to make the path clear, to move and progress through those 4 cups of wine to discovering what God wants you to do with your life.
So churches and pastors are simply tour guides on a journey God always wanted them to take.
Hello.
So good.
That's incredible. Thank you for talking about that.
Yes.
And it just gives you such a different perspective on the Last Supper even. Just this joy. Yeah. It's a feast. I mean, goodness gracious, if they're doing 4 cups of wine, you're collecting car keys. I mean, that's like a long night. They're enjoying themselves, and it's a different picture than just kind of more the somber, kind of terse religious service. It was a feast.
Yep, exactly. And an interesting thought too, and that is that on that night, Jesus did not take the final cup. So when you have the communion verse in the Gospels, when he said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood," that would have been the third cup, by the way, because he said after supper. So the supper happens right before the third cup. And then from that moment on, he says after that, and these lips will never touch the fruit of the vine again until I come into my kingdom. Mm-hmm. He's actually waiting to drink the last cup with us at the marriage supper of the Lamb.
Beautiful.
Oh my God.
So the ultimate fulfillment. Wow. He's going to raise his glass and basically say, you're all here. Let's have this final cup together.
Come on.
Thank you, Jesus.
Hello.
Wow.
So we're just living between cup 3 and cup 4. We're just, the dishes have been clear. We're waiting for dessert to get served.
Exactly.
Yes.
And until then, go make a difference, man.
Hey.
Come on.
That's great. Well, your newest book, we're holding it here for those watching on Access More and on YouTube. You can see this is Out of the Cave. This just released, Stepping into the Light When Depression Darkens What You See. What does this book mean to you? What was the story? And I mean, I know every book has an origin story.
Yeah, it was in 2018 when 3 pastors committed suicide, and I didn't know a single one of them. But it impacted me like I did. I never forget how grieved I got. And so we were in a series where I could do more open topics. It was a Q&A type of series. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? 30 years, I've never done a message on depression. So I studied for a week, which isn't nearly enough of time to devote to that topic. But I brought a message that became it hit such a nerve. It became one of the most rewatched messages we had ever delivered. And I thought, wow. And I brought it to a pastor's conference, same response. So I decided that I'm going to take 2 years and study on this, and this is going to be my next book. And I'll never know what everybody's going to need for the solution, but I can give this pastor's take on it. And because I think for everything, God has real solutions. And I don't, it's not to demean or to put down any of the earthly solutions. I have a son who's actually on medication. He's on the autism spectrum. So I obviously embrace what medicine and medical help can do for mental health. but I knew God had something to say on this topic, and it just became one of the greatest journeys of my life. I never worked harder on a book in my entire life.
Wow.
And actually finished it while I was living out 2020 with, the pandemic. And I was actually going through my own seasons of depression. I was finishing the book. So it was painful. It's the most vulnerable book I've ever written. It might be the last one I've ever written. I'm so vulnerable. I don't know. We'll see. But I really hope and I really believe it's going to help people as they can see the 6 ways Elijah got depressed and the 5 ways he got out of the cave of depression. So
Praise God for this.
Well, thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for taking on what is a topic that no one really wants to talk about it, but everybody's dealing with it. And what a perfect person for that, Elijah. And just how I love how you break up the book. In the first half, you're really talking about things that can contribute to depression. And I had never, ever heard anybody have the insight that you did, that Elijah was alone so often in the first half during his depressive period, but then you never see him from the anointing of Elisha ride solo from that moment forward. And you don't see the same sort of difficulty with depression. That alone is worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, he definitely did what secular psychologists would say. He did at least 6 things that, psychiatrists would say will get you depressed. So in just a few verses. And what's interesting, it came off this huge spiritual high in 1 Kings 18, and then 3 verses later, he wants to commit suicide. But then there was what's so cool was the clear steps and the first one's the most fun, because when the angel visited him, you would think when an angel visits you, it's going to be a pretty spiritual experience. And the angel said, hey, go sleep. Hey, wake up and eat something. Hey, go back to sleep. Hey, wake up and eat something. So interesting how the angel attends to his physical needs before he even took him on the journey of his spiritual needs. Gosh. And it says, strengthened by that food, he journeyed. And I think, so there's some cool solutions there in the steps that he took to get out of the cave. So thank you so much. I really do think it's going to help a lot of people. So,
yeah. And that's a really interesting and important point to make, that God won't do for you what you can do for you. He'll never eat for you. He'll never sleep for you. And so you actually, and this book is, I was looking at the back, the amount of footnotes you have in it, the amount of citations and studies and resources, not only scriptures, but also, you really can tell, it does show that you put some very thorough researching in to show the studies and the science behind ways that we can, even if we don't have certain conditions or mental health issues, we can actually bring on the symptoms of those things through just choices we're making. And it seems like that's happening more and more.
Yeah, more than 70% of the causes of depression are lifestyle related. And in the words of one guy that I researched, he said, we need to start talking less about the chemical imbalances and more about the imbalances in the way we live. And we do. We have lives that are contributing. There's a direct correlation to sunlight and depression. Let's just go right there. Yeah. And we have these sedentary indoor fast food, social media kind of lives. Well, guess what? I've just named 4 or 5 causes that are driving these triggers times 100. And so there are definitely some things we can do to lower the effects of mental health and depression and anxiety in our lives. So,
and you mentioned Mount Carmel and the high followed by Jezebel's low, her Facebook comment, as you call it in the book.
Yep.
You've been really open and you're very vulnerable about how difficult Sunday evenings can be for you as a communicator. Each Sunday having to climb up Mount Carmel and do it again, and how low that can be for you.
Yeah, and I think it's true for anybody in any industry. When you give your full emotions and adrenaline and passion and physical strength to something, and you go sit on the couch crashing from that, you're getting ready to make some choices on how you medicate. And even if it's something innocent like watching Netflix to 2:00 in the morning, that's where the devil loves to have us. He loves to have us in our self-talk, in our ruminating, in our forms of medicating, and that's where we become way more vulnerable. But we're probably the least protected actually then, because we think, okay, I can take a little breather here, and we let up. And I think that's where the enemy, the Bible says he prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. The last time somebody saw how a lion does that, but he doesn't just jump out there and say, hey, here I am. He's crouched down waiting for that opportunity. And I think that is one of the most vulnerable times for anyone.
Yeah, that's true.
Now you talk about some very specific things that you've done this, like sort of safeguards for your Sunday afternoons and just sort of things that you can do sort of practically. I know you've really limited social media, and you make sure you have some food, get your rest, but what are some other things that you found that have helped your state of mind, or even just through this most recent, time of a depressive period that really kind of helped you punch through it?
Yeah, the main thing is don't go through it alone. Honestly, if you're making me pick one, don't get alone in your thoughts, because it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. The more you think about it, chew on it, you're not going to chew your way into like, you know what? I think I feel better now. It's just going to get worse. Yeah. And so I'm very quick to let Tammy know, hey, I'm really tired. And so we're very intentional about our closeness during those moments. I hear from all of my closest ministry friends on Sunday night. How was your Sunday? How you feeling? How was it? And me to them. Hey, checking on you, man. Are you doing good? You preach good today? Anything you worried about? You okay? All right. Just, hey, take some time off. I'm gonna call you in the morning, and I just think we need each other a whole lot more than we think we do.
Yeah.
And not being afraid, to take that mask off and say, here's what's really going on. And I think the fear is that someone's going to go like, wow, gosh, dude, really? That's your issue? That's not what they're going to do. And, in the words of C.S. Lewis, friendship is born at the moment when the person says, what? You too? I thought I was the only one.
Great quote.
Yeah. And I think that's if I could wish anything on anyone, is a friend who can help them out of the cave, because it's going to happen.
Yeah. You call that the step into relational strength in the book. And that is
exactly. And it's what sustains. So it doesn't fix it. It sustains your health. Cause we still have to make our choices. You still can't be indoors all the time, and you do have to get some sleep, and you really do need to meet with God. And honestly, if I could pick one, you really need the power of a project. There's nothing more powerful to pull you out of depression than dreaming big dreams, but man, what sustains it is relationships. You can't do without it.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
If Tammy was on here, I would be interested to hear what, in your opinion, is the greatest thing that she does to encourage you. Or, maybe someone listening, they don't deal with depression, but they have a spouse that does, and they just go kind of like, I don't know how to help them because I don't know what it is to feel that. And it's hard, I think, sometimes when you can't see the world through someone else's eyes, to legitimize. And I know the various things I've faced that Jenny hasn't and Jenny has that I haven't, it can be difficult to know how to help. So what in those moments has Tammy done that's been the greatest asset to you?
Just not ignoring it. I mean, she doesn't ever come in and say, hey, talk to me. Oh, no, you're not talking. She doesn't prod or anything like that. But what she does do is she's just there. And, and so we just have a discipline now where we spend Sunday evening together on the couch together. We find one of our favorite TV shows. We usually eat a great meal together, and again, without being graphic, she allows me to talk this way. But we're very intentional about our closeness and our intimacy, and we don't leave that for chance. Let me say it that way. Too many people would leave it to perfect moods, perfect scenarios, and to And so I think some intentionality in dating your spouse and being close to them. I think God built us for that to be the thing that can bring soul strength and release and health and I don't think we utilize it enough.
That's a good word. It's and you just think about what you were saying. I was thinking about Paul saying, "Come back together, lest the enemy get there in between you." And what an interesting perspective. I mean, there's your next social media post for the book. Sex as a cure for depression. Bam.
There you go.
The click count will be through the roof.
Sex with your spouse.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, exactly.
Somebody here is saved. Okay, so that is some great. But it's funny. Such emphasis is on on our culture's perspective is on sex before marriage, and how hot that is, but just to think about how underutilized and unrecognized at times sex in marriage can be, and what an unsung hero it can be for all those things.
God created it, so He knew what He was doing, and we all know, the benefits from everything, just from feeling affirmed and close, and just all the things involved in that. And so we are, what we have that a lot of people don't have is a lot of experience.
Yeah.
We're older, and you do get wiser the older you get. And I'm just telling you, listen to a guy who's been married 35 years, it's important to be, we're very intentional about our date lunches and date nights, and have been for 35 years. And so, but that's not just for relational strength, marital strength, it's for our own personal health as well.
Yeah. No, you probably got a listener or two who's, driving down the road going, well, it's great, Pastor Chris, but I've got little kids, and, that's always the objection to date nights, and I should get a weekend away with my spouse, but, what are we going to do? And, what would you say was key to you guys' relationship when your kids were young and in grade school?
Yeah. So we honestly, we got babysitters, and there were times when that's all we could afford. And I remember many nights, the only money we had was enough to pay for the babysitter to go out on our weekly date night. Wow. And we would go to a coffee shop, and sometimes like at a Barnes and Noble, and read books and put them right back on the shelf, awesome. And just, that was our date night, just to sit around, just drink coffee and visit, and, hey, look at this picture, and oh, wow, check this out. And go sit on the outdoor little cafe that overlooks our city, and just, and so, but we kept it as a priority. The problem is that we're too child-centered. We let the kids drive our decisions, and that's one of the worst parenting decisions you can actually make. You've got to make the marriage the priority relationship. And by the way, the kids will love you for it. Yeah, they'll absolutely love you for it. So even if you can't afford it, I say still do it. Good. And no matter what their ages were, we found someone who could keep them one night a week, so we could get out and spend time together.
Wow.
That's a great word.
That's a great word. It's not waiting till you have money to be a giver. It's not waiting till you have time to date. It's because if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it then.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
We used to walk around Costco, and on a good night, we'd have the hot dog and Coke combo for $1.49. Early days, we might have just had samples on a few occasions, okay? But that was date night, and romance can work on any budget.
Yes, amen.
It absolutely can, and seriously, that is what ours looked like. Because with 5 kids, the babysitter was doing it per child, so it got pretty expensive.
Oh my gosh, I've never heard that though. That perspective of not allowing the lack of a budget for the actual meal to deter you from still just getting a babysitter. If that's all you can afford, great. Go drive around the city, park, and make out.
Exactly.
You might have 6 kids if you do that too much.
Exactly.
That's funny. Well, goodness, I can't thank you enough for your time. And for everyone listening and watching, the book is Out of the Cave, Stepping into the Light, When Depression Darkens What You See, by Pastor Chris Hodges. Get it on Amazon. I imagine you have a small group curriculum you've prepared for it as well.
We do.
Go through it get some sets now. Go through it this September with your small group at your church. You have a sermon series around it people can find on YouTube and on the Church of the Highlands app.
So helpful.
But thank you for your investment. Thank you for caring. Thank you for giving this resource for people to buy someone in their life who they know is struggling in a dark time, which is, let's be honest, everybody. Yeah. We all find ourselves in caves at times. Yeah.
But you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And I've never been a promoter of what I've produced, but I really do believe this could help some people. And so I appreciate you guys talking about it.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks for being with us today.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. And be sure to swing by levilusco.com to see what's going on in our world, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. In the meantime, we would love to connect with you on social media. Jenny and Levi Lusco, out.